I like to think that if you make a big enough mistake, you can learn a lot from it. Obviously, the mistake has to be small enough for there to be something left to build from, and with enough enthusiasm to right the wrongs. I'm still expecting the long-awaited sequel to E.T. on the Atari 2600.
If I've learned one thing from immersing myself in what the internet is interested in, it'll be that every thumbnail needs boobs or red circles or both, but moving beyond that, people are generally more interested in bad things than the positive equivalent. I think that comes from the same place as all those videos of watching people falling over. We take solace in the fact that it's not us making those mistakes. That, and we all like relentlessly tearing apart something that few people are going to defend. But I think sometimes you have to acknowledge when someone digs themselves out of a hole and recovers from a setback. As much as we love a fall from grace story, we love it even more when an individual or company redeems themselves in the eyes of onlookers. We often think that gaming developers are clinical machines that are incapable of internal reflection, but when they fix their own problems, it's a sight to behold. One that you'll never get tired of seeing. The Wii had a troubled if also highly successful life. You can point out how much money Nintendo made off of it and how they were able to carve out their own place in the market without directly competing with significantly more powerful consoles, both of which softened the blow inflicted by the Wii U's failure, but I'd argue that the main draw of the console never got too far off the ground. Certainly in the early days, the biggest selling point was the motion controls that would break down the barriers between game and player, bringing in a new wave of unparalleled immersion. Then you play Red Steel as a launch title with barely functioning controls and you wonder what's the point of anything.
Nintendo had the right idea with the Wii's launch. Maybe not the best ever lineup of games, but every console came with a copy of Wii Sports, which demonstrate the technology very nicely, even though, with hindsight, it wasn't that complicated. Failing that, I guess you could always play some of the launch titles. At least there was Twilight Princess.
Oh man, I don't know, there was some fun to be had in Pinball Hall of Fame. Maybe they should re-release it for the Switch's launch day, might just be what it needs to pick up some momentum. The first Red Steel game is both a victim of not having the right hardware and Ubisoft not being entirely sure what kind of game they wanted to make. There's tonal confusion present here that's hard to pin down but sticks out in key moments, where even the game itself is like, yeah, we don't know why we're here either. Nintendo, realizing that the Wii had room to grow with regards to clever technology, brought out the one-to-one motion controls present in the Wii Motion Plus add-on, with just 6 games made with this in mind. Zelda Skyward Sword used this and made combat interesting. Red Steel 2 used this and made combat incredible. Upgrade Skyward Sword's 8 directions to infinite choice with a real need to swing the Wii remote around to get things done, and every enemy encounter feels really involving. Also a simple on-the-fly transition between sword combat and gunplay. Devil's Third doesn't know shit. Comparing Red Steel 2 to what came before shows the remarkable transition between ironing out technical hiccups, overhauling the combat, and making everything require enthusiastic movement. It is a tiring game to play sometimes. I'm not going to say that Skyward Sword's combat is bad since it works well in its own environment, but oh, imagine if it was this good. Give Link a 6-shooter next time, nothing will go wrong. As a franchise grows with every new installment, we tend to forget about the game that started it all off. Only natural, really. You like to think that every time a new game comes out, it'll be better than the last, but that isn't always possible. Once Ubisoft realized that Assassin's Creed was something they could churn out new games for year on year to take advantage of a well-established fanbase that would buy them regardless of quality, focus towards creating a well-rounded quality product slipped in favor of meeting time constraints. Recent As Credo games haven't been all that spectacular, but part of this is because the series has already reached a natural peak in the form of Assassin's Creed 2. And I don't give a fuck about these glitchy new games because this one is incredible. We did have to go through the first Assassin's Creed game to get here, but I would say it was worth it. The problem is that the first AC game I played was the second one, and that is a hard act to follow at the best of times. I expected to step down when playing the game that started it all off, but not quite this far. We'll get into the comparison of a universally bad game versus a game that misuses its resources later with a game that's a bit more relevant, but Ubisoft found out the hard way that repetitive gameplay and awful enemy AI spreads across an open world game like some horrendous epidemic, and should be avoided at all costs. It doesn't completely ruin the game, but it does make it more of a challenge to enjoy it. It's a credit to Ubisoft's ability to read reviews and pick apart their own game to make the necessary improvements in Assassin's Creed 2, where combat is smooth, missions are varied, and hot damn, I kind of cared about the plot this time. Still don't think it's been beaten for quality since.
If you were to pick up a recent Assassin's Creed game like Unity or Syndicate, you can feel the dip in standard between those games and the earlier titles. Bear in mind that all Ubisoft have to do is reapply the ideas that were perfected in Assassin's Creed 2 and maybe alter some things to keep it fresh. You can make some good games. Maybe with the time off that they've given themselves, they can once again make Assassin's Creed a little bit less shit.
Claiming that game is bad is dealt with on an incremental scale. Obviously, one person's idea of a bad game varies based on perception and the sweeping definition of bad. I'd argue that the first Watch Dogs game isn't necessarily a bad game since you can squeeze some fun out of it, if you're looking hard enough, but considering every part of this game was a standalone title and what kind of game it's trying to be within its own genre, yikes. From that angle, and with Watch Dogs trying to be some kind of vast, interconnected open world with a hacking mechanic that makes on-the-fly gameplay more fluid, which in turn gives Grand Theft Auto something to think about. Nah, that's a good one. Am I picking on Ubisoft today? Yeah, a bit, but it's the kind of opposite of a backhanded compliment. What I shall now call a four-handed insult. I'm only talking about them because they have the ability to make a sequel which ironed out flaws. I've stated in the past that confidence would be hard to come by before the release of Watch Dogs 2 due to Ubisoft's handling of the first game, but to be fair to them, Ubisoft kept everything calm, under control, almost restrained in a way. Like the polar opposite of their acid-fueled E3 conferences. I went into Watch Dogs 2 not expecting a lot and was pleasantly surprised to find a bustling overworld devoid of the usual Ubisoft tropes but filled with enjoyable characters and equally laid-back gameplay. With the inevitable comparison to Grand Theft Auto which this kind of game encourages, it's not quite there yet, but it's edging ever closer. A little strange that someone as harmless and lawful as Marcus Holloway can gun down innocent people if you want, so maybe there's something to look into later down the line. An open world game made by Ubisoft that only features non-lethal weapons? I mean, crazier things have happened.
The act of rebooting a franchise is tantamount to tearing it down and starting again. Usually this comes about by wanting a new start on what you might think is a tired formula, or if you just haven't touched the franchise in many years. Regardless, you can't really consider a reboot a sequel because they're so far removed from the older games. Unless you can reboot a franchise while still referring back to the older games, but that sounds impossible, right?
Many things in this world are. For example, I'd have thought it impossible that Capcom could make a scary Resident Evil game after the action campfest school reunion that was Resident Evil 6. A game better enjoyed as a throwaway drain of your time than something you can pump deep analysis into later. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a bad game, but it does feel like a twisted parody of a Resident Evil game. You can enjoy it, but you start thinking that we've fallen pretty far from the tree at this stage. It went on to become Capcom's second best-selling game, which is nice for them, but then they tried to make more third-person shooters and that didn't go so well. Then one bright spark at Capcom noticed how popular all these first-person horror games are with facecam screaming YouTubers and thought, hey, didn't we used to make horror games? Clearly Resident Evil 7 is taking advantage of current trends with horror games being as popular as ever and people really wanting to play PT again, but you'll find no complaints over here. Hey, I remember when people were really pissed off at the switch to a first-person perspective. I think a few of them still are. But it means that all the atmosphere and spooky shit is being experienced through the eyes of the protagonist, which is all much creepier. Yeah, the bottom line is that Resident Evil 7 is a scary Resi game, so of course it's going to be better than 6, but it still retains the spirit of the franchise that constantly reminds you, in a good way, where it comes from. Striking a balance between creepy and campy was something that the first 4 games pretty much nailed, and I'm very happy to see it again. In my mind, someone picked this game up off the back of their love for Resident Evil 6 and expected a similar game. What a session that must have been. Most, if not all, franchises suffer a dip in quality from time to time. If anything, it's the hallmark of their own personal history that they've been around long enough and recover from setbacks to be a stronger franchise because of it. After all, there's only so many things you can do within a genre, so every time you get a review back that offers up more criticism, you like to think that you're getting closer and closer to the ideal formula. The first Devil May Cry was originally conceived to be a Resident Evil game, but was later expanded to be its own thing since this much action wouldn't work in a Resi game. I'm very unwell. It helped spawn this subgenre of action games with flashy combat and larger-than-life protagonists, and it's likely that without it we wouldn't have gotten Bayonetta or God of War. We also got Devil May Cry 2 from it, so it wasn't all good stuff. I fucking hate this game. You can like this game if you want, but I played it off the back of playing Devil May Cry before, and oh no, oh god, get it out of here. Why is there so much open space in a sequel to a game that used claustrophobic environments to keep you on your toes? Why is Dante so uncharismatic, not even in like a cheesy way like in Devil May Cry 1? Here's a turn up for the books. Why is it so fucking easy? You can attribute all of these problems to a variety of sources, but mostly Capcom decided to give the director's role to someone who isn't Hideki Kamiya, who helped make the first game so enjoyable and not really pumping as much money into it as they should have done if they wanted to make it into a successful franchise. Who knows what the series would look like if Kamiya was still on board, but the series was able to pick itself up off the canvas for the sequel's prequel, which still makes Devil May Cry 3 a sequel or I'll cut you. Oh, how I miss the style. DMC3 didn't just make Dante a fun character to be around. It's a game that was deliberately developed with the first game in mind, and every little factor was implemented and improved upon when stacking it up against DMC1. Combat is slick and cathartic, environments have more going on and aren't so empty, and it may have come to your attention that this game has your balls in a workshop vice that tightens over time to make overcoming these ridiculously hard challenges all the more satisfying. Because you didn't lose your testicles, I would consider that a good day. Notice how it's all in relation to DMC1 and not the sequel. That's because Devil May Cry 2 was so bad, so unredeemingly terrible, that Capcom bypassed it completely when looking for ways to make the franchise better. Devil May Cry 3 still came after, since 3 is a bigger number than 2, but the two games couldn't be further apart. Never before has a game series picked itself up from such a dire position before. It's probably inspiring or something, I don't know.
This is Rabbidluigi, and when the Devil May Cry reboot came out a few years ago, there was a worry that the series would be going down a path that would alienate long-time fans. But what we've seen with the transition from the second Devil May Cry game to the third game is that Capcom are more than capable of fixing problems that may net them better sales figures in the future. Only works if Capcom thinks it's a problem though.
Have you got an idea that you'd like me to turn to a countdown? Let me know in a comment down below, and make sure you check out my Twitter, where I'll be turning the best submissions into a poll where you can then decide the best topic. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.